It's AJ back in the Mighty Glue Stick channel. Nice to see you. So today I'm going to be covering the Cockatrice, which is a small monstrosity which has been around in Dungeons & Dragons, like many monsters, for a very long time. And I've got a lot of really good information from a couple of Dragon Magazine ecology articles. One from Dragon 329, relatively recent in 2005, and one from way back in March 1985. From our good old friend Ed Greenwood. So the basilisk and the cockatrice have an interesting relationship. That the basilisk was around before the cockatrice, and a lot of scholars actually think that the origin of the cockatrice stems from the prime material world of Earth. That's right, because the actual history of this creature is ours, terrestrial. It's a legendary creature, a mythological creature. Pliny the Elder was a Roman scholar who was responsible for pretty much recording the legend and disseminating the story of the basilisk. And it wasn't until the Middle Ages that we see the appearance of the first cockatrice, which is a lot like the lizard-like basilisk, who is reported to be killed by the sound of a crowing rooster. So there's a theory that it was bred by mages with roosters to create this weird hybrid creature which is immune to the sound of a rooster's crow, but still has a lot of the powers of the basilisk, primarily that of turning people to stone. So the last known reported sighting of a cockatrice was way back in 1537 in Warsaw, where two children and their nurse entered a disused cellar and fell dead on the spot. The presence of a basilisk was suspected. Eventually, a condemned criminal agreed to take on the monster and entered the cellar with a torch and an iron rake. He brought out the body of the spotted lizard with a rooster's feet. So that's the last recorded real-world instance of cockatrice. In Dungeons & Dragons, they have the size of a large goose or turkey. They look like a feral rooster with the wings of a bat and a serpent or dragon-like tail. The body and head grows a sparse collection of filthy feathers which grow in clumps. Males have a large comb on the top of the head, similar to a rooster, and flappy wattles that grow on the underside of the neck. Females have a much smaller comb on top of the head and no wattles. All parts of the cockatrice can petrify on contact with exposed flesh, and only the flesh is turned to stone, not items worn by the victim. The cockatrice can switch off this ability on all parts of its body, save for the feathers that grow on the end of its tail. They never switch off. The petrifying power of the cockatrice also extends into the ethereal and astral planes while it's alive, appearing as an aura in the shape of the cockatrice. This only occurs when it's got its power switched on, and it can switch off its power, and when the cockatrice switches off this ability by will, well, I'll cover that in a second. In a group of cockatrices, only one member will switch off its petrification at a time because they need to feed without turning their meal into stone. They can't digest stone. So they switch it off one at a time in order to feed, and the others will maintain their defense until it's their turn to eat. Their diet consists mostly of large bugs, reptiles, rodents, any small game. They'll even eat fish if they can, but they prefer to eat rats and snakes. They are mean, unintelligent, nasty, greedy, and frequently fly into fits of rage and violence. They have a social order based largely on vanity, bullying, and a natural alliance of nesting breeders. The males outnumber females, and it is common to see a single female with a harem of males, which are known as consorts. Generally, you'll never encounter a female by herself. Nesting pairs or groups stay with the nest unless it's had an entire crop of infertile eggs, in which case the nest will be abandoned and any treasure in the nest will be left behind. The cockatrices will avoid the spot as if it was cursed, so they won't go anywhere near it. Yeah, that's interesting. Nests of sufficient age will be lined with gold and shiny trinkets, as this denotes status amongst the cockatrices. Cockatrices who have a nest may be drawn to open displays of gold and silver or brilliant gems and react predictably violently to anyone who stands between them and their shiny prize. Females lay clutches of 1 or 2 eggs per month at a time of the waxing moon, and they hatch in around 2 weeks' time. Sometimes sooner, like 11 days, or sometimes up to 20 days. The chicks will eat any eggs that aren't hatched in the nest, and they grow to adulthood in about 4 to 6 months, starting out fist-sized, but they quickly attain size, and as soon as they've grown any feathers at all, they can petrify victims just like the adults can. Adults can live up to 30 years maximum, but 16 to 20 is more common. Cockatrices are immune to their own or other cockatrices' petrification power, so they can't, even when they're fighting amongst themselves, which they frequently, they don't and cannot petrify each other. However, they could be petrified by the gaze of a basilisk to that. The petrification effect ceases immediately after the death of the cockatrice, except for the potent tail feathers, which retain the power for another 1 to 4 days. There is, however, an alchemical formula to extend this potency indefinitely, and I'll do that in a second. While they are very nasty, the cockatrices can be trained with great effort, caution, and patience, enough so that they will not attack the handler and can obey basic instructions that don't go against their nature, but don't expect much of them because they're stupid creatures. There was a recorded case of an artist who kidnapped, drugged, and posed, then petrified victims and sold them as sculptures of surpassing skill and detail. However, in 5th edition that's going to be problematic because the petrification is not permanent, unlike earlier editions of the game. So the stats for the creature, it's got an armor class of 11, hit points 27, it's got a ground speed of 20 feet, it's not very fast, they're kind of ponderous, but a flight speed of 40 feet, and this denotes a creature which can attack from the air, so they will travel in short bursts of flight and they'll attack by flying to attack a person because they realise that they're much faster on the wing. They aren't very energetic flies, they don't have a lot of endurance, so every 2 to 5 rounds they have to stop and rest for a couple of rounds before they can take flight again. Otherwise they will drive themselves to exhaustion. So yeah, their typical tactic will be to fly out of range or fly into range to attack, and they'll only be on foot if they're moving around because they're tired. Otherwise they travel in short bursts of flight, which is fairly typical. They've got a strength of 6, so they're quite weak, can't hold on very, very hard. They've got a dexterity of 12, constitution of 12, intelligence of 2, wisdom of 13, and charisma of 5. So they're aware of their own social status more than anything else in their environment. Their typical reaction to anything in the environment is to either eat it or petrify it. And yeah, that's about it. Fight or flight. They've got dark vision out to 60 feet, passive perception of 11, challenge rating of half, and their attack action is listed as a bite. So that's their beak attack. +3 to hit. One creature does 3 points of piercing damage, and the target must succeed on a DC 11 Constitution saving throw against being magically petrified. On a failed save, the creature begins to turn to stone and is restrained. It must repeat the saving throw at the end of its next turn. On a success, the effect ends. On a failure, the creature is petrified for 24 hours. Now, it doesn't say that if you succeed on a petrification saving throw, you're immune to the petrification for 24 hours. So it can repeatedly do this, or a large group of them with successive attacks and some unlucky dice rolls on the victim's part, they will turn you to stone. So that's kind of scary. Also, your possessions are not turned to stone, just your body is. And also, if it's not really implied here, but if you're wearing full plate armor, like completely covered head to foot, with very few places in your body that are exposed, it's going to be almost impossible for a cockatrice to turn you to stone. They have to hit your flesh. However, not just their beak will do it, any part of their body touching you while they have their petrification turned on will turn you to stone, and particularly those potent tail feathers. So yeah, and it takes 2 rounds generally for it to petrify you. So you're going to go and start to slow down, get restrained, and then it'll turn you to stone. So yeah, if you've got your wherewithal and you realise that the petrification won't last forever, it may be wise to actually clutch your items and possessions to you as tightly as possible so that it makes it very difficult for anyone else to rob you, which they most certainly would if there's any passing goblins or anything. They're most certainly going to loot a petrified person. Why wouldn't you? Even adventurers would do. So there, yes, I've got the notes here with the formula. First of all, there's actually a market for cockatrices. Sales of live cockatrice to alchemists, paranoids of all types seeking guardians, jaded collectors of exotic pets, or would-be sculptors of questionable morals. Cockatrices, the adults sell for 500 to 1,000 gold pieces, and eggs for 300 to 600 each. However, it's not guaranteed. You've got about a 60% chance of the egg hatching. Otherwise, there's a 40% chance that it will be infertile. So, yeah, because it's been taken away its mother. The formula for curing the tail feathers of a cockatrice. First of all, it's a good idea to cast mending on them first to make sure that they are whole and intact with no damage, because they'll need to be perfect for this process to actually work. This is from the notebooks of Bane the Mighty, a renowned linguist. For the making of whips, hats, cloaks, and like adorned with cockatrice tail feathers, the feathers must be magically preserved. To do this, take a cauldron, and into it pour equal parts of oil of etherealness, aqua regia, and human tears, at least half an ounce of each. Think about how long it would take you to gather up that many tears. Mix this liquid well with a glass or crystal rod and heat it to boiling, while stirring in at least 6,000 gold pieces worth of powdered agate and either 6 whole, live or dead, cerebral parasites, or the blood, 7 drops of more, of a slad, githyanki, or a nightmare. Stir this mixture until the solid components are dissolved, and then immerse the cockatrice feathers into the liquid while it is boiling. Take the cauldron away from the heat immediately after putting the feathers into the liquid, and let the cauldron stand until the liquid evaporates. The cockatrice feathers will then be intact, resilient, and flexible, and will remain so forever unless damaged or destroyed. Thank you, Ed Greenwood. So there you have it, folks. That's how you preserve the tail feathers of a cockatrice to make a magical item, and basically everything that you need to know about cockatrice. Thanks for listening, everyone, and I'll catch you up with the video soon.